Do you really think you were created to live in constant struggle, moving from one locked door to another, endlessly searching for what was already placed inside you? That idea itself is the illusion. You were never designed to spend your life chasing outcomes as if they are somewhere far away from you. The moment you start searching outside, you quietly accept the belief that you are missing something, and that belief alone keeps the cycle of lack alive. What if nothing you desire is actually outside of you? What if the ability to bring it forth has always been within you, but you were taught to ignore it and depend only on effort, pressure, and hardship? Look back honestly. Has worry ever created peace? Has forcing outcomes ever brought lasting fulfillment? It never has, because life responds not to struggle, but to inner certainty. The one who already feels secure does not chase security. The one who already feels whole does not beg to be completed. The one who already feels chosen does not seek permission from the world. There is a teaching hidden in stillness. When you stop trying to force life, you begin to notice that life responds to what you assume to be true. Be still and know is not about inaction, it is about alignment. It is about shifting from desperation into inner knowing. So if you have been constantly looking for stability, approval, or opportunity, pause that movement outward and redirect it inward. Start occupying the feeling of already having what you desire. Let it settle in your awareness until it feels normal, familiar, natural. That inner state changes everything, because when your identity shifts, your experience begins to follow without resistance. Opportunities don't arrive because you chase them harder. They appear because your inner world finally matches them. Life has never been responding to your effort alone. It has always been responding to your state of being. Everything you experience is shaped from within, like a reflection cast back to you from an unseen mirror. The outer world is not randomly attacking you or rewarding you. It is expressing what you consistently hold inside as true. If your inner assumptions are rooted in limitation, you will keep meeting situations that confirm that story. But if your inner state carries trust, expansion, and quiet certainty, then your external reality begins to reorganize itself around that. This is why two people can live completely different lives in the same environment, because they are not experiencing the world directly, they are experiencing their interpretation of it. Nothing is happening to you in the way it appears. It is happening through you. And once that becomes clear, you stop feeling like life is something you must fight against, and start realizing it is something you are continuously shaping from within. Most people try to fix their world by changing what is outside them, not realizing they are only treating the surface. They chase money to feel safe, relationships to feel valued, achievements to feel worthy. But even after reaching those goals, the emptiness often returns because the root has not changed. The inner identity remains the same, so the outer experiences eventually mirror it again. This is why transformation never begins with the external. It always begins with what you accept about yourself in silence. Your thoughts, your internal dialogue, and the emotional atmosphere you carry are constantly forming your next experience. So the real question is not what you want to get from life, but what you are repeatedly affirming about who you are. Because life does not argue with your assumptions, it simply reflects them back with perfect consistency. Do you really think you were created for a life of constant effort, running after things as if they are always just out of reach? That idea itself is the misunderstanding. You were never meant to live in a state of chasing. The moment you start searching outside of yourself, you quietly accept the belief that what you want is missing. And that single assumption keeps the cycle alive. What if nothing you desire is actually separate from you? What if everything you are looking for already exists within your awareness, waiting for you to recognize it instead of struggle for it? Life does not respond to pressure or anxiety. It responds to inner certainty. The one who already feels secure does not chase security. The one who already feels loved does not beg for affection. The one who already feels chosen does not seek validation from the world. There is a deeper intelligence at work that responds to your state of being, not your effort. When you stop identifying as someone who is lacking and start resting in the feeling of fulfillment, something shifts quietly but powerfully. You begin to align with a different expression of life. Doors do not open because you forced them. They open because you are no longer standing in the vibration of lack. This is not about doing more, but about becoming aware of what you are being internally. And when that changes, everything around you begins to reorganize itself without resistance, as if life was simply waiting for you to stop resisting it. Everything you experience in your outer world is a reflection of an inner pattern you are carrying, whether you are conscious of it or not. Life is not randomly rewarding or punishing you. It is expressing what you consistently assume to be true. If your inner state is shaped by fear, limitation, or doubt, then your experiences will mirror those patterns back to you in physical form. If your inner state carries trust, stability, and quiet confidence, then your outer world will begin to reflect that same tone. This is why two people can walk through the same circumstances and experience completely different realities. They are not living in the same world internally. The external is simply a mirror, not the source. And once you understand this deeply, you stop blaming life and start observing yourself. Nothing is happening against you, it is unfolding through you. Your thoughts, your emotional habits, and the meaning you assign to events are constantly shaping what comes next. When you feel stuck, it is not because life is refusing you something, but because your inner identity is repeating a familiar pattern. Change does not begin with forcing the outside to behave differently. It begins with shifting the internal assumption that is generating the experience. As that inner state transforms, the reflection has no choice but to follow. Most people live in reaction to what they see, believing the physical world is the starting point of change. But in truth, everything begins in imagination and belief first, and only then takes form outwardly. When someone assumes failure, they begin noticing more evidence of failure. When someone assumes rejection, they unconsciously move in ways that attract more rejection. It feels like life is confirming their fears. But what is actually happening is that the inner projection is being reflected back. The mind is like a projector, and experience is the screen. If the projection is filled with limitation, the screen will display limitation. If the projection shifts to expansion and possibility, the external scene must adjust accordingly. This is why waiting for proof before believing keeps people stuck. They are trying to reverse the natural order. Real change happens when you first occupy the state internally and allow the world to reorganize itself around it. You do not need to fight circumstances or force outcomes. You only need to become aware of what you are consistently telling yourself about who you are and what life is. Because that internal dialogue is the blueprint your reality is following. When that dialogue changes, your perception changes. And when perception changes, experience has no choice but to follow. Desire itself is not a mistake or a burden. It is direction. It is life pointing you toward a version of reality that already exists in potential form. The problem is not desire, but the belief that it must be chased or earned through struggle. When you see desire as something distant, you create separation between you and it. But when you understand it as an invitation to align, everything shifts. You are not trying to create something new, you are tuning into something that already exists in the unseen. Like adjusting a frequency on a radio, you do not create the station, you simply align with it. In the same way, when you align your inner state with the feeling of already having what you desire, life begins to respond naturally. This is why faith is not blind hope, but inner agreement with what is already unfolding. You stop living from lack and start living from fulfillment. And in that state, effort becomes lighter, decisions become clearer, and timing feels almost guided. You are no longer forcing life to give you something. You are allowing what is already yours to meet you. The struggle was never in the receiving. The struggle was in the belief that you were separate from it. When that belief dissolves, life begins to flow in a way that feels less like pursuit and more like recognition. To truly understand creation, you must learn to see beyond what is immediately visible. What you desire is not something distant that needs to be hunted down or earned through struggle. It already exists in the unseen dimension of possibility, waiting for your awareness to align with it. The moment you accept internally that it is already yours, something subtle begins to shift in the way life responds to you. Reality does not argue with conviction, it reorganizes itself around it. The idea that desire leads to disappointment only arises when desire is treated as separation, as something outside of you. But when desire is understood as realization, as something already formed in potential, the entire relationship changes. You are no longer reaching outward, you are stepping inward into alignment. Nature already demonstrates this truth everywhere. Nothing in nature is forced, yet everything unfolds perfectly. The sun rises without effort, rivers move without resistance, trees grow without anxiety about their height or timing. Everything simply follows its own inner law. In the same way, when you stop resisting your inner alignment and begin to trust it, life begins to feel less like struggle and more like unfolding. You do not need to fight for what is meant for you. You only need to stop separating yourself from it in your mind. The vision placed within you is not a trick or a test. It is a direction. It is showing you what is already available in the deeper reality of existence. When you embody the feeling of already having it, your outer world has no choice but to reflect that state back to you. You are not waiting for life to change. Life is waiting for you to settle into what is already true within you. There is a fundamental difference between searching for something and knowing it is already present. Searching is built on the assumption of absence, while knowing is grounded in the awareness of completion. Most people live in a continuous cycle of seeking love, success, safety, validation, always reinforcing the idea that these things are somewhere beyond their reach. And because the inner state is one of lack, the outer experience mirrors that same absence. But when you shift from seeking to being, something entirely different happens. You no longer move as someone trying to acquire, but as someone expressing what is already fulfilled. This is what it means to live in the end. It is not imagination as escape, but imagination as identity. Like an actor who fully becomes the role they are playing, you begin to inhabit the state of your fulfilled desire so completely that it becomes natural in your awareness. You are no longer hoping for proof, you are embodying the result. And in that embodiment, life begins to adjust itself accordingly. Waiting keeps people trapped because it reinforces delay. But knowing dissolves delay entirely. If you assume lack, you experience lack. If you assume fulfillment, you experience fulfillment. The world is not fixed, it is responsive, and it always reflects the dominant state you consistently occupy within yourself. This is why change does not begin in action alone, but in assumption. When your inner identity shifts, your outer experience follows without resistance. Faith is not passive waiting, it is active alignment with what is not yet visible. It is the ability to move through life with certainty, even when there is no physical evidence to support it. Most people misunderstand faith because they rely only on what their senses can confirm. But the senses only report what has already manifested. They do not reveal what is forming. Everything in the physical world began as something unseen, an idea, a thought, a belief held consistently in mind. In the same way, your desires already exist in a non-physical state before they appear in form. Faith is the bridge between those two states. When you truly trust, you stop trying to force outcomes or demand immediate proof. You allow the unseen to unfold in its own timing while maintaining inner certainty that it is already done. This is not denial of reality, it is recognition of deeper reality. When you live from this awareness, your behavior changes naturally. You move with calm confidence instead of anxiety. You act without desperation because you are no longer questioning whether life will provide. You are aligned with the knowing that it already is. Doubt interrupts this process because it splits your awareness between possibility and fear. But unwavering faith holds a single direction. It does not fluctuate based on external signals. It remains steady even when nothing appears to be changing. And in that steadiness, life begins to reorganize itself in ways that often feel unexpected but perfectly timed. Ultimately, everything you experience is shaped by the internal state you consistently return to. There is no real separation between the mind that observes and the world that is observed, because what you call outer reality is continuously filtered through your consciousness. You do not meet life as it is in an absolute sense. You meet it as it is interpreted through your attention, your expectations, your emotional tone, and the identity you quietly hold about yourself. This is why two people can live through the same situation and walk away with entirely different experiences. One sees possibility, the other sees limitation, and both are correct within the boundaries of their internal framework. Over time, these internal frameworks become repetitive loops. What you assume about yourself becomes familiar, and what is familiar becomes automatic. Without noticing, you begin to reinforce a stable pattern of perception that filters what you notice, what you ignore, and how you respond. In this way, consciousness is not passive. It is actively shaping meaning, direction, and interpretation in every moment. What you call your life is deeply connected to the state you inhabit most often, because repetition builds identity, and identity becomes the lens through which everything is experienced. Your imagination is not just creative, it is generative. It does not only produce fantasy, but also lays down the mental groundwork through which experience is later organized. Every time you imagine a scenario vividly, you are rehearsing a possible version of reality within yourself. The mind does not strictly separate imagined experience from emotionally significant experience. Instead, it encodes repeated inner experiences as familiar templates. This is why expectation becomes so powerful. When you repeatedly imagine certain outcomes, your attention begins to notice patterns that align with those inner images. You start to recognize opportunities, behaviors, and signals that match the internal model you have been feeding. In simple terms, your imagination trains your perception. It shapes what feels normal, what feels likely, and what feels possible. Over time, this creates a feedback loop. What you imagine influences what you expect influences what you notice, and what you notice reinforces what you believe. This is not about forcing outcomes, but about understanding how deeply your inner world organizes your outer interpretation. The more emotionally consistent your imagination becomes, the more naturally your mind treats it as a reference point for reality. This means that what you repeatedly assume becomes the structure of your life. Assumptions are not just thoughts you occasionally have, they are quiet agreements your mind makes with reality about what is true for you. If you assume limitation, you begin to organize your decisions, interpretations, and reactions around that assumption. You may not even realize it, but subtle choices begin to reflect it. What you attempt, what you avoid, how you interpret setbacks, and how you define success. If you assume expansion, the same mechanisms begin to operate in a different direction. You start to interpret uncertainty as openness rather than threat. You begin to see gaps where others see walls. Your behavior adjusts without force because your identity is no longer fighting reality. It is expressing a different interpretation of it. This is how patterns form in relationships, opportunities, and personal growth. Not through isolated events, but through consistent internal positioning. Over time, assumptions solidify into a lived structure, and that structure becomes the predictable rhythm of your experience. The shift, then, is not about trying to control the external world, but about refining the internal state from which you live. When you stop chasing outcomes as something separate from you, you stop reinforcing the idea that they are distant or unavailable. Chasing creates separation. Alignment dissolves it. Alignment is not passive waiting. It is the stabilization of a new identity internally, where your thoughts, emotional responses, and self-concept begin to match the experience you intend to have. In this state, action becomes natural rather than forced, because it arises from coherence rather than desperation. You are no longer trying to convince reality to change. You are embodying a version of yourself for whom that reality is already normal. This is why inner stability matters more than intensity of effort. When your state is steady, your perception becomes steady, and your decisions become steady. Life begins to feel less like something you are fighting against, and more like something you are moving with. Desire, in this understanding, is not a sign of lack, but a directional intelligence embedded within awareness itself. It is not asking you to chase something outside of you, but rather pointing toward a version of experience that already exists in potential form within the wider field of possibility you are capable of accessing. When desire is misunderstood, it is often treated as pressure, as something that highlights absence and creates urgency. But in its deeper function, desire is far more neutral and precise. It reveals orientation, not deficiency. It shows you where your attention is naturally expanding, where your consciousness is beginning to lean, and what kind of experience is ready to be recognized by you if resistance is reduced. In this way, desire becomes less about effort and more about awareness. Instead of pushing you into constant pursuit, it invites you into recognition. The tension that people often associate with wanting something does not come from desire itself, but from the interpretation that what is desired is separate or unavailable. When that interpretation is softened, desire becomes smooth, almost quiet, and it begins to feel like an inner compass rather than a demand. You are no longer chasing something to complete you. You are simply noticing the direction in which your experience is already trying to evolve. In this sense, desire is not disruptive to peace. It is an extension of it, expressing itself as subtle movement within consciousness, guiding attention toward alignment rather than fragmentation. When desire is interpreted in this way, the entire process of living begins to shift from pursuit into alignment. Instead of organizing your energy around trying to obtain something external, you begin to stabilize your internal state so that it no longer contradicts what you are aware is possible. This is where consistency becomes important, not as effort or discipline in a forced sense, but as a gentle return to a chosen way of being. Through repeated attention, emotional familiarity, and quiet reinforcement of inner states, your consciousness begins to settle into a more unified expression of itself. You are no longer fluctuating between belief and doubt in the same unstable rhythm, because you are gradually reducing the internal contrast that creates that instability. As this steadiness grows, your perception of reality also begins to reorganize. What once felt distant or disconnected starts to appear in subtle reflections first. Small signs, brief encounters, internal shifts in interpretation. Over time, these subtle expressions become more coherent and more consistent, not because the external world is being forced to change, but because your awareness is no longer filtering it through contradiction. The mind stops fracturing experience into opposing narratives and instead begins to receive it as a continuous unfolding. This creates a sense of quiet momentum where things begin to feel less random and more coordinated, as if life is responding to a clearer internal signal that you are now sustaining with greater stability. As this inner stability continues to deepen, what once felt uncertain begins to take on a sense of structure, and what once felt impossible begins to feel less like a distant outcome and more like a natural extension of your current state. This shift is not sudden or dramatic, it is gradual, but it carries a quality of inevitability when your internal contradictions begin to dissolve. The experience of life starts to feel less fragmented because your perception is no longer splitting possibility into likely and unlikely with the same emotional intensity. Instead, there is a growing sense of coherence, where experience is simply unfolding along the path of least internal resistance. In this condition, you are not forcing outcomes, nor are you waiting passively for them. You are participating through alignment, where your inner state and outer experience are no longer in conflict, but are part of the same continuous expression. What changes most is not the world itself in an immediate sense, but your capacity to perceive it without distortion. As that distortion decreases, reality feels more responsive, not because it has become magical, but because you are no longer filtering it through doubt, fragmentation, or inner opposition. Over time, this creates a lived sense of steadiness, where experience feels less like something happening to you and more like something moving through you in a coherent direction.